Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. Again, my apologies for the way this turned out, but we have three questioners tonight. Uni Beal from Minnesota Farmers Union, Shelley DePestel from Minnesota Milk Producers, and Glenn Groth from Minnesota Farm Bureau. And candidates will allow you to introduce yourselves as we go. If you want to do that right now, go ahead, and then we can start with the questioning. So,
start.
You want to start?
What do you want for the introduction? Minute?
Yeah.
How long is it? A minute.
Just talk loud.
No, I'm only half on the camera, so I really.
Half on the.
Sorry.
Turn.
Oh, it's.
There we go. Okay, perfect.
That might not have been a complaint. I'm Jonathan Eisner. I'm the DFL endorsed candidate running for District 21B, which goes from Kenyon all the way to the river and includes St. Charles. I grew up in Blooming Prairie, where I was a town kid, but it's Blooming Prairie, so you baled hay, you picked rocks, you milked cows, you did what everybody does in an agricultural community. And on top of that, my father worked for AutoChem, which was a company that worked to develop new uses for soybean oils, many of the things that we benefit from today. And so agriculture and its molecules have been in my life since, well, my entire life. And now I have gone around, done a few things, went to law school, had a practice in International Falls for a year, unfortunately got sick, came back to southern Minnesota, and now I want to work to make sure that our communities can continue to support our families, including my grandchildren at some point. So thank you for having me.
Hello, Thomas Trias is my name. I live on my family's fifth generation farm in Wilmington Township outside of Spring Grove in Houston County. So I grew up there, went to school, graduated from Spring Grove High School, went off to the University of Minnesota, and moved out to Washington, worked in the U.S. Senate, and moved back and worked in a family business here in Fillmore County, and then not here in Fillmore County, but in Fillmore County, and ran for a school board in 2014 in Spring Grove, so I'm a current school board member in that school district, and running for the state legislature here in 28B, so Fillmore County and Houston County. Current representative, the Honorable Greg Davids is my opponent. So I always say I'm not running against anyone in particular. I'm running for the people of Fillmore and Houston County, and running as a Democrat in a two-party system. But we have to work together, both parties, to get anything done in the state. So that's what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Greg's on there now. Almost. Hi, I'm Tyrell Clark. I'm running for 26B. That's southern and eastern Olmsted County. Born and raised in the area. Grew up on a family farm outside of Dover. It was my great-grandparents' farm, and then my father had bought it from them. Unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 4, so we ended up moving to town because it was closer for my mom to get all of us to school. I have 3 siblings. I haven't actually left Yoda since then. I went to school at RCTC and then St. Mary's, and I'm now, I've served as the Yoda mayor for 6 years, and I did 2 years as city council. In addition to all that, I help my brother out, who's a current farmer. He runs about 30 head north of Yoda, and that's me.
Good evening. My name is Nels Pearson. I am the state representative for House District 26B. 26B includes 14 of the 18 townships, including the Olmsted County half of Chatfield, and Eota, Dover, as well as Stewartville, and a portion of the city of Rochester. I grew up on a dairy farm in a small community called Butterfield, Minnesota, and I had an older brother that I knew was going to take over the family farm, so I knew I had to find a better path, and I ended up getting involved in politics. So I'm not sure about the better path, but here we are tonight, and certainly it has been an honor to serve the people of House District 26B since 2014 when I was first re-elected in 2016. I currently work in Rochester as a realtor, so I do deal with some of the ag community in their transactional activities in and outside of Olmsted County. Certainly has been a great career. It gives me the flexibility to also serve in the Minnesota legislature.
Minnesota, thank you. I'm State Representative Greg Davids, District 28B. I'm the father of 3, husband of 1, and grandfather of 3, soon to be grandfather of 5. So we're got the family's growing. I chair the tax committee. In real life, I'm in the financial planning business, and my wife and I own our family farm. I'm excited to be here to talk about what we've done in the tax committee. Tax reciprocity with Wisconsin, Social Security tax reduction, military pension reduction, talk about veterans homes, veteran cemeteries. House File 5, very important reinsurance bill that is going to lower premiums. Blue Cross is going to lower premiums 27.7% because of what we did. We gave no money to insurance companies for that. So we have the reinsurance bill. I just got a note here, we just got another $282 million surplus for September, so that's looking good. First in the nation, student loan reductions, school building, ag land, we put money in broadband, and we wrote a bill for tax conformity. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that one. Beginning farmer tax credit.
Next time.
Okay, Uni, you want to start? No, you'll have to use this one.
Okay. Well, Minnesota has long been a leader in renewable fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel. Do you support Minnesota move to B20, and what ideas do you have to further grow this industry?
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do. I very much support it. As we continue to see year after year, environmental issues are not going to go away. They keep getting worse, and as we know, a huge part of that is releasing CO2 from petroleum products into our atmosphere that could greatly be reduced by giving more focus towards ethanol and biofuels. So I do strongly support that. Like I said in my introduction, my father worked at AutoChem where they were developing new uses for soybean oils. And I think we can expand that beyond biofuels towards developing bioplastics and things along those lines. We have companies in Minnesota that have already been giving focus to that for R&R, or R&D, sorry. And I think this is a very positive look towards the future that we could be developing.
Yeah, we'll just go down the line and then maybe reverse the question next time, or the order. I do support B20. I think the move was a good decision, and I think this year will be the implementation, or 2019 will be the implementation, so I do support that. And I think we need to keep Minnesota in the top 5 ethanol producing states in the nation, as we currently are. One of the facilities one of 21 facilities in Minnesota is in our district in 28B in Preston, and a lot of employment and opportunity there for farmers, especially in a time like this when commodity prices are at its lowest. It's tough out there, and my dad still does corn and beans, and we've done that, like I said, 5 generations. And but if we weren't established, there's no chance as a small farm. So for my generation, getting into the industry, or getting into agriculture, we need other markets, and ethanol and biodiesel is one of the most important ones for us in this environment.
Sound a bit of like a repeater here, but I also support it as well. And I think we need to work on expanding that. I have a car that I actually bought from the state of Minnesota that can run on ethanol, and it has a little sticker on it reminding me every time that it can. And I think we need to, and I also have figured out which gas stations have the best price for the biofuels, because they seem to fluctuate a lot between Quick Trip and Hy-Vee and Holiday, and I'm not going to say which is the cheapest. But I think we need more of that, and I think we need some of our citizens to realize what they can do. And I think as long as we keep growing that market, there will be a place for it.
as a member of the Ag Finance and Ag Policy Committee, I've been supportive of the renewable fuels, and you know, we do need to work with the industries though as well, make sure that the product is performing the way that we need it to, and we need to make sure that those standards are being met. And so the ag utilization, AURI research is an important part of that. Been very supportive of trying to get more funds into those hands so that we can make sure that this renewable fuels are something that we can use across the board safely. And you know, there's sometimes a reputation for some of these fuels in the state of Minnesota in the colder weathers. There's requests for exemptions and things like that. We need to make sure that these fuels are performing to those standards so that we don't have those complaints, and that's why I've been supportive of making sure that they're working properly. And of course, very pleased with the federal government now lifting the restrictions on E15 being used year-round as well. So that's something I think our farmers and agriculturalists should be optimistic about for our commodity prices.
I was able to secure funding some years ago for the ethanol plant in Preston so that could be built. I also worked with Democrat Senator Dallas Sams, God rest his soul, from Staples, Minnesota, and we wrote the 2006 ethanol bill, which raised the percentage that had to be mixed in. As far as the question, Eunice, was the B20 issue. Now that one, of course, I've been supportive of, but there are some real problems there because I have farmers that are soybean farmers that say, why did you do that? Or why do you want to go up? Why do you want to go up? Because every winter their trucks gel up and they have some really, really big problems. So I'm very supportive. We have to work out the science on it so that it can actually work. So very supportive of renewable fuels. We have the environmentalists are fighting us every step of the way here because biofuels have to do with fossil fuels, and they want to shut down fossil fuels in their entirety. And so that will be a hurdle that we will have to overcome because they're fighting it every step of the way.
Okay, next question will be by Shelley, and then Tom, you can go first.
For you, Dave.
Livestock manure, when applied correctly, is a valuable resource. For every gallon of milk that comes out of a cow, 3 gallons of high-quality, nutrient-rich manure is available. Manure is better for water quality and lessens the need for importing phosphorus and nitrogen and provides organic matter to the land to improve soil health. However, crop farmers without right equipment are hesitant to use it. What can you and the state of Minnesota do to improve manure utilization?
Okay, we'll start with Thomas Trias on this one.
Yeah. So there are NPCA guidelines for manure implementation utilization, and so as a legislature, making sure that the resources are there to equip our agencies in knife-in strategies and different techniques in order to utilize natural fertilizer instead of artificial fertilizer. I mean, we've seen tremendous impacts to our groundwater with alternatives, as you mentioned in the question, that we've been coming up with over the last century. And there are towns, including Chatfield and other towns, that have really interesting water problems. So we need to keep encouraging the natural fertilization of our agriculture and our crops. And corn and beans is obviously a big part of that in this area. So thanks for the question.
I'm going to sound like repeaters, but when you have 5 people, that's how it's going to work. That being said, I do think that we can expand education and make sure that we have our crop farmers well educated. I'm sure they know far more than I do, but we have great resources through the U of M and other ag alliances that can really help inform them on how it can happen. And just like Thomas was saying, if we can utilize the natural over the other chemicals, that's good for cities. That being said, sometimes it doesn't work. I would like to see expansion of some bio natural gas facilities, and I think that's something that the state could be involved in as well. So.
Yeah, again, you hit with the question, you kind of lead us into a lot of what the solution is, and it's really informing the public. Just outside of the city of Eota, there's a very large dairy operation, and they do a good job. They're great ambassadors. They invite the community out to see what goes on, and of course, when manure is being applied, the strategies that are used are a big component of the nuisance that can be created, of course. Having grown up on a dairy farm, I know firsthand what that nuisance is like, and yet again, the value that's there for our agriculturalists, the crop land, the absorption rates, everything else, really checks out on why the manure needs to be applied and used, and I agree also that using a Minnesota Extension is going to be a big component of that, so that it's being applied where needed, that it's being applied as an application, because it takes a little bit more effort to know exactly what my nitrogen rates are going to be in that type of material. It's almost like hitting the easy button by spreading the artificial fertilizers, and so we just need to make sure that we're working with farmers and agriculturalists to dial that in just right, so that they're getting the optimal usage out of the applications.
I believe the infrastructure is already in place. It's already there. So a lot of that goes through the executive branch. So I would be interested in what you would have for ideas of what the legislature should do. I think that, like I said, the infrastructure is in place. There is great value, and if we can have more farms utilize that, I think we're going to be in a lot better shape. So be careful when you asking the government to get involved in some of this stuff. The infrastructure is there. It's already there. We've got Extension working on it. If there's something that needs to be changed, let us know, and we can work on that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I mean, the extension program would be the primary source for making sure people can move forward with confidence, have the necessary training, and can get any answers to questions. But for a lot of our sustainable ag programs, what we're looking for in the future, we do hit a bottleneck with, like you said, the having access to the equipment, having the necessary equipment for doing these things, because a lot of people talk about how crop diversity would be just this wonderful thing, answers to a lot of our problems, but if you don't have the equipment and you're not going to go out and just make a huge purchase of this to enter a whole area of agriculture that you've never experienced. It's too much risk to ask anybody to take on. And it all goes the same with manure. I mean, as we get these just amazing yields year after year compared to 10, 20 years ago, to all of a sudden ask people to start going in a different direction is a huge ask. And so if we're going to do that, we need to limit the risk, we need to provide the equipment, and we need to set up any necessary training and have very quick resources for answering questions.
Okay, the next question will be from Glenn Gross.
What will you do to grow Southeast Minnesota's livestock industry?
Start with Terrell.
All right. I think there's a lot of connections that we can make in this state for our livestock industry, especially when we have a populace like we do up in the metro area. I love seeing when my neighbors and friends are selling a quarter beef or a half beef, and if we can try to make some more connections like that up in the cities, it'll be like, this is Minnesota beef. This is Minnesota pork. It would be a really good thing. I went all the way to Florida, and they're like, we have Minnesota pork for you. I'm like, that's great. and it's terrific. And I think there's more ways we could do things like that. If we're viewed in other states like premium, which we are, I think there's a lot of ways we could expand that. So, yeah.
I'm really not sure how you legislate that specifically, but it certainly is something that we as ambassadors of our products here in the state of Minnesota, we have always taken that on, and having been a promoter of the ADA, I think that's a very good philosophy to have and good to aspire to. I think more importantly, we need to make sure that Minnesota can be a competitive state to raise agriculture and to raise livestock specifically. We need to make sure that we don't have the MPCA breathing down people's necks on any expansion that they want to do. This is a state that's backbone is agriculture, and it's certainly something that when the government is on people's backs, and worse yet, in their wallets, it doesn't bode well for our livestock industry that's currently struggling as it is. So for me, the testimony that we heard in the Agriculture Finance Committee, as we were talking about getting financing to prevent suicides in rural Minnesota, the suicide helpline funding, and the polling that had been done, it wasn't the concern of the livestock producers or farmers about the commodity prices that was really the top issue. The top issue was government entities coming in and fining and kind of harassing these farmers, the MPCA, and so we need to turn that around. We need to make sure that the MPCA is working to help farmers rather than really being the fire-breathing dragon we fear.
How do we promote livestock is the question. I think we need to make Minnesota a more business-friendly state. When I was the chairman of the Ag Committee, what I really focused on was adding value to agricultural products here. Don't ship them down the river. Let's do it here, whether it be a livestock slaughtering facility, whether it be whatever it is. So you can take your commodities to the end market closer. Ethanol. When I chaired the Ag Committee, ethanol was a big deal that met that criteria for me. And ethanol also helps with the livestock part. So we have to get Minnesota a more business-friendly state. We have to make the permitting process work a whole lot better. We have to lower tax rates. We have to lower agricultural property tax rates like I did last year. And Representative Pearson helped me with that. And so I think you need to make the business climate a whole lot more friendly in Minnesota so that livestock producers can have a future where they have some certainty that they'll be in business down the road. Our tax structure is way too high. I've been pounding on that, and we've made some really strong strides to do that. So the way we get more livestock production is we add value to it here, and I think that would, and we've done some of that, but we need to continue it, and we need to do it more.
I think that we should promote smaller livestock farming and new farming programs. As we've been moving forward, we've just been creating larger and larger pig farms, cattle farms, things along those lines, and it's allowed us to create more product for the market, but it hasn't allowed us to separate ourselves from what's already available in the market. And so the easy thing I think of is Washington State and how they took on adapting new standards for apples, and so they have this whole industry that every other state has to catch up to. And even now, when other states like South Carolina have caught up in many ways, Washington State still has this just standard of this is our apple, this is what we made. Minnesota, of course, is catching up with that very quickly, but we just make our own apples from scratch. So good for us. But other things in order to encourage that would be to help new farmers be more independent, help farmers that are already there to to be able to reach out and access more of the market independently. So transportation, better roads for any greater area Minnesota community is going to be necessary. And yeah, so.
Yeah, this is a good question. My family sold our beef cattle 10 years ago. We had them since we started farming. We had livestock, and this is the first time we don't have livestock. That's because if you're not going big, if you're not expanding, then you're not going to survive, and you're not going to make enough money. The input costs are just much too high to survive as a smaller operation. So and I don't blame the folks who are trying to get bigger. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, and it helps preserve the family farm and the line of succession. I think that's good. But we also have to make sure that if you do want to start farming and create a small operation with livestock, we need to make sure the cooperative structures are there so that they're not alone in this game. We need to make sure that there's funds available to help mentor these farmers. There were programs introduced last session that would do that. Representative Poppy led on a number of things. There are even some things that Representative Davids and Representative Pearson, good ideas, but the problem is in a lot of these issues we agree on 80-90% of them, but they're not willing to work together at the legislature to really get past any of these bills, and they wait till the last 3.5 hours of session to introduce a 989-page supplemental budget bill that has all kinds of different things in it. That's our problem, because we agree on a lot of these issues, but I disagree on the process, and that's why we need new representation. You're first. Oh, you got to ask a question.
Okay. Next will be Uni again. Farmers Union.
Well, more and more farmers are installing solar systems on their farms. And do you support solar, and what ideas do you see to promote solar? Because in different other states, they have tax incentives, like in Iowa, our neighboring state. So.
Okay, Nels, answer first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's hard to oppose solar. I mean, that's not literally what anyone's out there doing. It's really, are we going to make sure that it's a cost-effective way of producing energy? And you know, it needs. Right now, we're seeing that the costs have been driven down, and that solar is becoming competitive on its own. Do we still need a little bit of a incentive on that? I think yes, but. You know, we can't just pretend that creating solar and having solar out there in our current technological capability is not the total solution either. We can have as much solar on the grid as we want, but it's all about base load in energy, and we need to make sure that we have a competitive market in the industry across the board, and that includes making sure that our base load is covered, and regardless of what's going on with the solar, I think we need to make sure that is provided for.
Well, first of all, budget bills of 1,000 pages, we learned that one from the Democrats. So that's nothing new. That's nothing, you know, I was hoping this forum wouldn't get partisan like that, but apparently it has. With that, when it comes to solar, we have to be very, very careful. There's going to be some problems here with net metering. We have to look at what we're doing in net metering. Right now, some of the, you know, the My Energies of the world, some of those folks, they have like, what, how many hundreds and hundreds of folks that are building just at 39.5 kilowatts, or megawatts, kilowatts, so that they can sell back to the local co-op at retail prices. Now, that's not right. Now, as far as solar goes, if you're putting in solar to run your operation, fine. But I think net metering has to be net metering. The question then becomes, how long do we subsidize solar? We subsidized ethanol for a period of time, and they're off of subsidies. So at what point can solar become competitive enough where you don't have to have the subsidies? And we have to have base load. We have to have base load. They have a project they're looking up in Superior because the tax structure wasn't favorable enough in Minnesota, a natural gas plant. But who's holding this up? The environmentalists are saying, we don't want a gas plant. You know, it was dirty coal, then it was clean coal, then it went to natural gas, extremely clean. Now the environmentalists are fighting clean natural gas because it's a fossil fuel. So I hope that the PUC will approve that gas plant on the Minnesota side, working with Wisconsin at Superior. Hopefully it works.
I strongly believe that our rural communities are being suffocated in a lot of ways. Different structures are just twisting around us, and I really think that our smaller communities being able to access solar programs would be a huge benefit, a huge release from a lot of those problems that we're experiencing. With that, it would require that we allow the cities to start to be able to develop their own programs towards solar energy, but that would require a lot of working with the current energy companies that are in place. So many of the energy companies are already seeing the benefits because the costs are low enough that we're there. We're Minnesota, and this time of year it's going to be really hard to believe this, but the sun is always there. We usually have enough of it that we can be able to use solar power, and with the more advanced solar panels that are being developed, we could start even manufacturing them in northern Minnesota with all of the minerals that we have up there, which would allow the Iron Range to become more independent as well. And so these are programs that subsidizing them would benefit the economy of the entire state and create a lot of very quick relief for families in our small communities.
Yeah. There's so much potential with solar in agriculture. I mean, we have the land, the buildings to do it, and it's just a matter of making sure that price point is there and met. And you know what? We gotta have state incentives for some of these things, like ethanol, because ethanol was better for the environment, better for the local economies. That's where government can come in and help push along an industry or measures. And guess what? We're better off because poets in Preston, and we're gonna be better off when Minnesota is the number one solar producing and solar using state in the country and hopefully the world. China is moving way quicker on this than we are because they realize the effects that it's happening and the effects of coal on their environment. So the sooner we get to this point, I think the better, and that's where state involvement and of course federal involvement too, but government involvement, public sector, private sector partnerships will, I think, work best when it comes to alternative and renewable fuels.
We are getting close to a place where I think solar is becoming very economical. I think as a state we can still encourage it to happen. At the same time, I think we're getting technology advances in battery technology that is going to need some of those precious metals to take that next step where they can carry the load at night. We drive by on I-90 of Garland, and they're pumping right now. So having that sort of technology that can help balance out that load all the way through the night, it's coming. So we need to have that solar infrastructure. The state can support it. However, at some point, just like Greg David said, it'll be able to supplement itself. So it's just figuring out that point, and that's why we're going to work on it.
Okay, next question will be Shelley DePestle, Minnesota Bill.
Yes, Minnesota has clean water funds totaling $220 million every 2 years. These funds could help encourage farmers to try new, often expensive practices that could have huge positive impacts for water quality. So far, the funds have not been used for on-farm water practices. Would you agree that farmers should be part of the solution to water quality by using clean water funds to try new practices?
Okay, first will be Greg Davids.
Yes. I yield my time. Oh, absolutely, they should be able to get those funds, whether it be for buffers or whatever we're looking at, yes, they should be able to use those funds. And hopefully we can get that done.
Also, yes, we have so many different programs that we're just at the edge of implementing, whether it's winter crops or just hundreds of other things, how we handle developing different nitrogen uses. Again, Minnesota, the extension program. So yes, farmers need to be part of that solution with any conversation that's if it affects somebody, then they just need to be involved. And so yeah, it is that simple.
Yeah, I agree with the panel here. And I think, especially when it comes to cover crops, for example, there's some amazing technologies out there. The University of Minnesota is doing a lot of work in trying to discover new ways to keep our waters clean and keep our yields high. And so, but there's got to be that public-private partnership, like I mentioned with solar, and we could use a Clean Water Fund certainly for agricultural purposes.
I agree across. At the same time, I also I think we have to acknowledge as a state that we have thousands of miles of streams going across thousands of farms, and so they most certainly need to be a partner in it. And I think these funds most certainly should be available.
Shelley, can you repeat the question?
Yes, Minnesota has clean water funding totaling $220 million every 2 years. These funds could help encourage farmers to try new and often expensive practices that could have huge positive impacts for water quality. So far, these funds have not been used for on-farm water practices. Would you agree that farmers should be part of the solution of water quality?
Last sentence again.
Would you agree that farmers should be part of the solution to water quality by using these clean water funds to try new practices?
So, because the question is implying that it's not allowed for on-farm
I think
practices?
It's that it has not been.
Okay.
It has not
Yeah,
been. And so to kind of
and again, I'd want to do an analysis of this. I mean, everybody's right. In many ways, of course, they should be at the table in the conversations. And, I am on the Ag Finance Committee. I'm on the Ag Policy Committee, and I don't know if there's just been an analysis done that's saying the rate of return on reducing pollution is not as easily captured in the agriculture industry, where Governor Dayton has almost exclusively blamed the agriculture industry at the same time. I don't know how it's possible that they aren't at the table on this, and it's an interesting source of revenue. I think that should certainly be explored. I don't see any reason why anyone would disagree with that. Again, the answer is implied in the question. Of course, if that's the best way to reduce the amount of waste and pollution that's going into our lakes, waters, and streams, then of course it should be, especially since our governor claims that that's been the number one culprit and cause.
So much for not getting partisan.
Next question will be Glenn Grove.
Yep. What can you do to ensure Southeast Minnesota's farms have a reliable and available workforce?
Start with Jonathan again.
Yeah, it's one of those questions where this did not seem to be much of an issue for a long time, and now it very much is a very big issue. That said, being able to increase transportation across the state, quicker, healthier infrastructure would allow people from different areas of the state to come out and access our area, so that they can use or take advantage of any temporary seasonal work. I mean, having modern road structures would be one. Having some form of mass transportation is beyond necessary. It's really cut us off from the rest of the state, and by the rest of the state, I really mean the the 7 major counties that make up the Twin Cities area. And so transportation would be primary for a lot of our economy in the area as a whole. But other than that, encouraging the federal government to allow for different work programs for immigrant workers. So, yeah.
Okay. When I go around and talk to businesses and people looking to expand our local economy in Houston and Fillmore County, the biggest issue that I hear is not our incredible tax burden, and we're the highest tax. We hear that all, taxes. It's workforce shortage. We don't have people to fill skilled jobs. And if we don't have people to work our jobs, we can't have the jobs there. So, and agriculture is the backbone of our communities. We all 5 of us agree on that. And so if we're gonna agree on that and continue down that path that's been successful for me 5 generations, we need people to work and we can't allow politicians to come in during times of political during campaign season and pit Native Americans versus the immigrant communities who are doing a lot of the seasonal jobs that provide us with cheap food, especially fruits and vegetables. But dairy farmers in our area rely heavily on immigrant labor and visas. So we cannot continue to divide the country on those issues. We need people to work these jobs, and the sooner we realize that and come to an agreement on that, the better off we'll be.
Talking about workforce for ag, just to remind. This is really an issue that when I was talking to a friend of mine that farms, he's a small farmer, he's like, I just can't find people to come and do the work that we need, that are willing to work hard. And he's not that far away from from Rochester, so he should be able to pull in. But at the same time, it's trying to find those connections that in Rochester and trying to get him those people. And it's really hard to find a workforce right now across the area. I think Nels mentioned it. We're at 2.9% unemployment, and it hits you. It hits every single business. I think there's a lot of opportunity for getting people that need housing into those communities that are willing to work hard. But at the same time, it's also acknowledgement that we need immigration reform at the national level to allow us to have some of these workers that really want to work hard for us. So I know that's pushing it off at the national level, but at the same time, I think we all can agree we need immigration reform too.
Yeah, again, I think the main divergence from how the folks on the left have answered the question tonight versus my answer is we need to make sure that we have an educated workforce. We need to show that the jobs that are out in the rural part of our state are worth having, that these jobs are good jobs. We can't do things like artificially inflate wages for the jobs someone working at a mall for $15 an hour versus grinding it out, milking cows through 2 shifts because you're doing 3 a days, and that's pretty tough to compete. So we got to make sure we've got, again, there was a push from the left side here to reduce the size of these herds and reduce the size of farms. And what is lost then is efficiency. So the reality of agriculture today is a lot of it is science-based. A lot of it is we need a strong, well-educated workforce that's out there, and these jobs need to be attractive. And to say that tax relief isn't one of the major issues, well, if the tax burden in the state of Minnesota wasn't so high, the farmers could afford to pay their employees more. So it's absolutely preposterous to make that claim.
Farms having a reliable workforce, it's much bigger than that. And I'll get to the farms in just a second. I was at a meeting yesterday in Chatfield, where the Southeast Minnesota League of Municipalities released a report that I was able to get funded with Senator Nelson, Miller, and you voted for it, thank you, by the way. They released their results yesterday, and in the Rochester area, we're going to be short in just a few years 40,000 workers, 40,000 new jobs. That's non-farm jobs. That's jobs. So we have to work with the feds because we can't dictate immigration policy, but we have to, the ag committees and other committees have to work with the feds to get immigration policy that makes sense. Legal immigration. I'm all for immigration as long as it's legal. And so we have a much bigger problem than, you know, I don't mean to say just farms, because farms are very, very important. They do have problems with it, but it's going to be even much more intense because, and it's my fault, I got the first money there for a Destination Medical Center. That was in my 2011 tax bill. But this thing is going to explode positively. So the research that's been done is very, very important. Read the book, Where Money Walks. Where Money Walks. Tax policy makes a huge difference. We are losing many, many of our executives to 4 states, Florida, Tennessee, South Dakota, and what's the other one? Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and South Dakota because of tax policy. So the money is flying out of the state of Minnesota. We're losing billions of dollars, and tax policy matters a lot.
Okay, Uni Beal?
Okay. Do you, let's see, Minnesota farmers are taxed at a higher rate on school capital improvement levies than resident homeowners. Do you support reducing this tax burden, and how would you accomplish this?
Okay, we'll start with Thomas Treas.
Yeah. Just on the last question, no one said taxes don't matter, but that's what unfortunately the people in power are trying to
What was
say.
the question?
I'm going back on the last question. I have time. So I will like to credit, it was a bipartisan bill in the 2017 tax bill, I believe, the 40% ag credit for bonds. And Representative Davids, of course, chaired the tax meeting at that time. I thought it should have been more than 40%, because when it comes to school bonds and referendums, the farmers get hit the biggest, and the rural school districts suffer the most. And that's all we have in this part of the state are small school districts with a lot of ag property, and we can't compete with the Twin Cities Metro. And so my mentor, Representative Marquardt and Poppy, and they worked on this with Greg, and we got it through. Thankfully, I'm very fortunate for that. So communities like Rushford could have 40% ag tax credit, even though Representative Davis didn't vote for this new school. But anyway, I think we need to do a lot more on making sure that burden is not
How would I do that?
overly done on
I
the
don't do
tax bill. So, good question.
You need the question repeated again?
Well,
Did you get it?
how would I vote on the Rushford School? I don't live there,
Half of the funding came from the state of Minnesota.
which I brought. That was my bill. Tommy, you know what you're talking about, please. It's embarrassing.
I just talked to Representative Pulowski. I'll have to call him.
Yeah, give him a call.
All right.
That was my bill.
School bonds.
For Rushford.
School bonds for rural. We have Dover Yoda. It's this mix that we're talking about right now between rural and ag. When I'm the mayor of Yoda, so I get to see the tax bases between the two. And just for example, Yoda Township, I'm throwing this out, has a valuable tax base at like 450 million, while the city of Yoda has 150. So I think that speaks a lot to exactly what you're saying is where's that money going to come from for the schools? And I do support the bill where they did do the tax credit, and I think we need more of that to make sure that these rural schools have the support. At the same time, I also think we need to continue to make sure schools are supported at the Capitol. I know they increased the support, but I think we need to do more of that. We still haven't caught back up to Tim Pawlenty, the cuts that he did, and I think when we cut taxes or we don't support school education, it hurts farms and it hurts our rural community.
Yeah, first of all, rural schools are vital, and we need to make sure that they are a focus of the state because it is something that right now, as the schools close, the communities die. And it's a tragedy of what's going on, not so much in Olmsted County, but you go out into some of the rural districts in northern Minnesota, you go out into southwestern Minnesota, and some of those communities are really struggling. And again, it's great and easy to bring a school referendum in. And when that tax basis, as Mayor Clark was just alluding to, is so heavily weighted, where the farmer's carrying the large burden of that, it's easy to get the folks in town to support it. And, that's just a reality. So one of the bills that's been brought forward is the house and garage in 1 acre bill. Something that I believe I co-authored at least one version of that, and I think that's a solid opportunity to kind of level that playing field, where you're essentially saying, hey, everyone's got to carry the same burden. I think 2 years ago at this very debate, I made the distinction that farmers need to educate their neighbors in town that their land, their farm is their 401k. All right, that's your retirement. And basically, you are being forced to pay property taxes on that, while people who use a traditional 401k, they don't pay any property tax on that. And it really is something we need to educate and make that argument. And again, that's why I support that piece of legislation.
In the late 1990s or early 2000s, Senator Kendrick Scable and I carried 2 bills. It was House Garage and 1 acre for excess levy overrides, House Garage and 1 acre for building referendum. We got it for excess levy overrides passed way back then. I have been working since to get House Garage and 1 acre for building referendums. Chair Drazkowski, through the Property Tax Committee, we were able to not do an actual house garage in 1 acre, but what we did is farmers were paying on average 10 times as much on school building referendums as people in town. Eunice, that's not right. That's not right that we do that. So what we did in the 2017 tax bill is we had a 40% buy down. We didn't shift it on to commercial industrial, we didn't shift it on to in town, we didn't shift it. I paid for it, about $55 million on the buy down. That's all the money I could put on it. Now, it's my intention to continue that, and I have to give a lot of credit here to Chair Drazkowski, because he did all the fine points, and Representative Paul Marquardt from Dilworth, the Democrat. Those two worked on this very, very hard, and then when it passed through the Property Tax Division, it comes to full tax committee, and that's what we did. So we knocked off 40%, so you're paying about 6 times as much on the farm for building referendum. As far as the Rushford School goes, I got the money for the Rushford School to buy that down, and then we added the 40% reduction on. So those are just the facts. So very supportive. I'd like to get to a full house garage in 1 acre if we possibly can for building referendum, and I'll continue to work on that in 2019.
This is one of the areas that makes me very concerned about the future of our rural areas. This idea that education and agriculture are somehow at odds with each other and are being attacked. Representative Dress, well, I don't want to. That's not fair because he's not here to say anything. Even he was brought up, but I'm not going to bring this up. But there are certain issues where we have seen that many of our foundations, many of the things that our grandparents built generation by generation, are now being sold for scrap by political identities, and that just has to stop. We worked very hard to create our schools. We worked very hard to create our agricultural communities. Now we've hit this issue, and the reason that I put all of this emphasis on before my answer is that this is an example where we have to work together, or it will not happen correctly. Now, 100 years ago, kids graduated from a school, they went into their community, and they used that education to advance their community. Today, kids graduate from a school, and they go to the cities because that's where we can really invest in a living wage. And if we're lucky, many of the people from my generation will find one of the few jobs where you can make a living wage and raise your families in a healthy environment, or will be able to return after we've paid off school debts and things like that. We have to take we have to take the educational base away from agriculture and apply it to where it's being used, which is the businesses in the cities.
Okay, Shelley, you have another question? Glenn?
I already asked him.
Would you support expanding the beginning farmer tax credit to farm transfers within immediate family?
I'm first, right? Yes, Terrell.
Yes.
Terrell is first.
I would.
Well, I'm glad he's fully analyzed that tax credit of the bill that I authored and got passed into law. You know, the concern is the amount of money that is, and of course there are specific tools that within families a farm can be transferred, and for many farmers, I'm not sure that they would take advantage of it for transferring it, right? But beginning farmer tax credit also includes renting the property, and that transaction is happening all of the time. And so from a policy decision as the author of that bill, again, the easy yes answer is a little baffling to me. I'm glad, again, there's been a full analysis done of this. But the beginning farmer tax credits to create new small farmers, people starting out, and new farmers that include the communities as we drive from Rochester to the Twin Cities, the small lots of land that are being leased out right now, or someone who's getting into horticulture and growing flowers in Minnesota, that diversification of agriculture. So the public policy reason that this was written in the first place is really to start a new generation of agriculturalists. And so doing that farm transfer thing, while it is something, I mean, it blows the budget, because immediately all of that money would immediately be used up, and those dollars would be absorbed by the annual rental from father to daughter, father to son, any of that in-family type of a transactional thing, because the rental would just wipe out the total budget for what we did for beginning farmer tax credit. And again, my philosophy of why we wrote the legislation was to create new farmers in our state.
And I really give Representative Pearson a lot of credit on this issue, the beginning farmer tax credit. He did a lot of work on this, and it wasn't an easy job. As far as the question goes, we have to be careful, because I had one attorney tell me, he said, well, what do you think of this? Well, first of all, they blew it. They messed up, because they went around my back and they went to other committees to try and sneak it in an omnibus bill. I found out about it, and they weren't even going to go through the proper channels to get this thing done. So I'm very interested in, we have analyzed some things. I had one attorney tell me, said, if this goes with the family, there's going to be a lot of people going to jail, because there could be a lot of corruption with it. Now, I'm all for getting the family to the farm, but I got a better idea on how to do that. What you do is you get rid of the estate tax. That's how you do it. You get rid of the estate tax, which I have pushed for so long. Out the federal level, they're up to over 11 million. I got it so it was $1 million. And so I got it so it's 2 million, now we're going up to 3 million, which still isn't enough. That's how you keep the family farm going. That's how you get the new farmer going, is get rid of the estate tax. It's an evil tax, because what you've done is you've worked your whole life to create your estate, you've been taxed the whole way through, and you're dead, and we're going to tax you again. That's not very Minnesota nice. So there's some real problems. I'm totally open on the beginning farmer tax credit to take a look at how this could work within family units, but it would have to be locked down really, really tight, because I don't want any family farmers going to jail.
Yes, I support it. As long you can sell your property, you can sell your farm to the kid down the street, but not to your own child. It is a strange difference. That being said, we would have to set up some very clear boundaries on what's being accomplished, because it does open up a lot of loopholes that could be taken advantage of, and so there would have to be protection, such as a clear intent date of sale, and other just other practices that would have to be determined in the future. But yeah, it's a good idea, and also, yes, we would have to be very, very careful about how we do it, and very, very open and very, very clear. Otherwise, it does create a lot of potential troubles.
Yeah, I'm going to differ a little bit. No, I do not. I probably would not support this. I think if you're a family, if your parents own the farm, they're going to probably give you a pretty good deal on it, unless they really don't like you. And so you're already you're already benefiting. I mean, I'm benefiting tremendously because my ancestors came, started farming, got a great deal on the land, land was almost free, and I just happened to be born on the same property. I didn't choose; it just happened, and so I'm benefiting a lot from it, which I'm very grateful for. Don't get me wrong, but same with folks with the estate tax. It's like, okay, well, you're already a millionaire. Okay, $5 million, now it's $11 million on the federal level. Now, which farmer around Houston and Fillmore has over $3-4 million, $5 million of land? I mean, there might be a couple. Greg, do you? I don't know, but there might be a couple. But really, I don't know. I don't think that's fair for the people trying to get into agriculture, which is what I think what Representative Pearson said he wanted to do. His intention of the bill was to help new farmers into agriculture. That's what we need. And that's going to grow our local economy in Houston, Fillmore, and in this part of the state. And so I think the beginner tax credit, great idea. I fully support it, but it's got to be for new farmers.
Okay, this will probably be our last question, I believe, from Uni.
Come on, Dave.
Well,
Then
your
I'll let you each
question,
give a summation. So.
well, your questions have started me thinking. Years ago, I worked with Farmers Union and AgStar on developing a protocol for giving a 10% tax break to anyone who sold their land to not a new farmer, but an existing farmer. It doesn't have to be a relative. So anyway, that's where this question is coming from. Because right now, the beginning tax credit, you can't really sell to your own child. You have to sell it to a nephew or something.
Yeah, the beginning farmer tax credit
Yeah.
bill
So-
was designed so that we could encourage.
wasn't done.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, I want to expand beginning farmer to farmers already in business. There's farmers who have been in business 10 to 15 years and they cannot buy their family farm because their siblings and the economy is terrible. So I would want to expand it to your own sibling, your own children, and to give tax breaks to farmers. It doesn't have to be beginning, it can be young farmers. Okay.
Yeah. I'll begin answering the question by coming back to, again, the origin of it, of the beginning farmer tax credit in some ways was because any beginning farmer was almost out of the chute at a huge disadvantage to the adjacent farmer. If you've got 240 acre parcels, right, and they're side by side, someone new trying to get into farming has to go in, and if they don't have anything to borrow against, if they don't have collateral, if they don't have that, and they're going in trying to get a loan from a bank, it's virtually impossible. And the amount of time that it takes versus that farmer maybe who has his land paid off or paid down to 50% of its value, he can walk right in, have that check written the next day in many circumstances. And it was so hard for beginning farmers to even be competitive, not just in the purchase, but also in the rental of these properties. So the beginning farmer tax credit couples both the philosophy that we need to educate beginning farmers. So it didn't mean you had to be young, by the way. You could be just getting into the industry for the first time, and I think it's for the first 10 years. You do have to be taking some courses to make sure that you have some stability and some financial training on what you need to do for managing your books and making sure that you're going to be profitable. And so again, it's really designed in the anticipation, like I say, when it is a family-to-family transaction, a lot of times it's a favorable transaction. The properties maybe being sold just slightly below market value or considerably below market value anyway. And so putting the tax credit in those circumstances or just to any neighboring farmer would get us right back at that disadvantage of really trying to get new agriculturalists and farmers out there in the industry.
Representative Pearson's bill was a great bill, and it was fun to work on it because I can remember in tax committee, you remember the people who had testified on it, these were young farmers and they were brilliant and they wanted to farm, and this bill helps them. Now, is the bill perfect the way it is? Could there be some changes made? I mean, that's why you go to the next session. That's very possible. But when it came to the estate tax, when I was chair in 2011, and Eunice, you know about this, it was $1 million. And I respectfully discussed that with the governor, and he said, "Oh, David, you're just for the rich. You're just for the rich." And I said, "Governor, do you consider a farm in Fillmore County with a quarter section rich?" "Oh, no, those are the farms we want. Those are the farms we want." I said, "Well, they could very easily lose the farm because at the time, land was $10,000 an acre. The estate tax was $1 million. They would have to sell land they'd have to give up land of 160 acres because of the estate tax." So the governor said, and I wanted to do it January 1st of that year. He went to July. He said, "Okay, we'll comply with the feds if it's a family farm or if it's a small business." So I said, "Deal, let's do that." So that's what we did. And then I've been expanding on it since then, and the governor signed where it's an increase. It goes about $200,000 a year. Eventually it's going to be $3 million. But there's a lot of farmers in Fillmore and Houston counties who have assets much larger than $3 million. $3 million is not enough. You take, if land, just say it's 10, it's not 10 now, but say 8, but just say 10 for easy math. If you have 200 acres, you're $2 million there if you have any cattle, if you have any equipment, if you have any savings, if you have any IRAs, you're easily over $3 million. And so you have to sell assets because somebody in the family died. That's wrong.
I'm uncertain. There's parts of it that I like, but I haven't. This is just such a new one. I haven't considered it enough to really come to an honest conclusion. I mean, I like it in the sense that it would be beneficial. We're talking about somebody who's in a practice of farming and they already own their own land, yeah? Or
Farming with their father or relative.
oh,
They've
okay.
been farming maybe 15, 20 years.
But they don't have their own land yet.
They maybe have a little here, but the main family farm, they don't.
But for a necessary business of farming, they don't. Oh, then yes, then I support that. Well, that was easier. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just a continuation of the last question, from what I'm gathering. Yeah, I mean, I think the system needs to be fair. I'm for a fair tax structure. With the estate tax, there's middle ground. Yeah, $1 million was too low, but there's middle ground between 1 million or 2 or 3, what we have, and 11 million on the federal level. So with anything, there's middle ground. With this beginner tax credit, there's middle ground. So we got to find that, and we got to work with both parties to do that. And that's the thing about government right now that I really do not appreciate is that you have the majority led by one party and the governor another, and you write this, for example, a tax bill, and to conform with the federal taxes, so we don't have to do two different have two sets of books, right? And then we can't get the governor, we can't get the chief executive to be on board, or it doesn't matter what party. If you can't get the other party's agreement on anything, nothing's going to get done. So that's the problem that I see with state government, of course, federal government as well. But in St. Paul, we can do a lot better. As a school board member, I'm nonpartisan. We don't come to the table with lines drawn. Some districts, there might be some partisanship in it, but in our school district, we come as nonpartisan, and we work together to do what's best for the district and for the kids. And we need to do that for the state of Minnesota as well.
Any bill is always a work in progress. Acknowledge Nels did a lot of hard work, and it sounds like it's a pretty solid bill. at the same time, it could always be improved. As legislators, I think you have to have that open door to have these conversations to figure out if it's the right fit. Yes, I'll acknowledge, Nels, I was a little short with that, and I shouldn't have been. But at the same time, I think when we go up at the state capitol, we need to make sure that we have all those conversations. We need to have that conversation, and we need to acknowledge that each biennium we can improve on what we have to the next. So that's.
Okay with that? Each want to give a 2-minute summation of who you are, why you're running, and why you think you deserve to be elected.
Want to go reverse order this time, or how do you want to?
Oh, we're picking.
Rob.
Switching it up here. Okay. Oh, that took 2. Okay.
It's like a door prize.
Yeah. Door prize.
Okay, Greg, you're number 2.
Low score wins.
Who's number 1?
I'm number 1 with a lot of people.
All right. Well, I really appreciate this forum. Too bad that we can't get a broadcast, but at the same time, I think any time we're able to sit down and have these communications is good, especially where we can have a group of us. I feel like ag is one area where we have a lot more bipartisan approval. I feel like there is other parts of our structure that I think they could learn from the members that represent the ag community, because we really feel like, from what I can tell, that there is a lot of middle ground that we can work out. And I think we need representatives to go up there and do that are willing to work across and don't view ag as a partisan one way or the other. Just that we are representatives of our district first, and the people, and all of the people, not just the town folk. So that's really what I like to see here, is that there is it feels like, in many issues, not all of them, bipartisan support. So that's I think it's encouraging. Why should you vote for me? I've born and raised in the district. I really feel like I've worked hard to be a mayor of a community that's rather rural. My front door has a great view of a family farm. I'll acknowledge I haven't lived on a family farm in a while, but at the same time, there are friends and neighbors. We have worked hard to work together on a number of issues, and I feel like we need representatives that will go up there and with that idea that they'll be bipartisan, working across the aisle for long-term solutions, and that's what we need. I'm not going to use 2 minutes.
Who's number 2?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for having the forum here. I'm excited about this race. I do have to correct something that was in the Bluff Country Reader here the other day, where my opponent said in 2017, Rep. Greg Davids gave insurance companies $542 million in taxpayer dollars with no strings attached. That is not correct. That is not even close. We didn't give any money to insurance companies. We set up a reinsurance bill. And it's interesting that Governor Dayton's own Commerce Commissioner said that without reinsurance, there'd be no individual health market in Minnesota. So we kind of needed to do it. So if you're against the reinsurance bill, you are for increasing insurance premiums 27% in this area, because we mainly have the blues. There's a few Medica down here. Then it goes on to say, even with this taxpayer handout, most Minnesotans will see an increase in premiums rather than a decrease. We're in the second year of decreases, 27.7% decrease. That's a good thing. And just remember, folks, too much of a good thing is a good thing. So with that being said, I'm the senior member of the House on my side of the aisle. All that really means is I'm just really old, is what it means. But it does mean more than that, because the system is based upon seniority. I have paid my dues. I have earned the right to be the senior member of our caucus. Now, why is that important? Big deal. Well, it is a big deal. You get the committees, you get your bills heard, you can do a lot of things that a new member cannot do. More importantly, when we come to redistricting, rural Minnesota is going to lose seats. We're going to lose seats. We cannot afford to lose the seniority. Republican or Democrat. I mean, Pulowski is a senior member. And it's important in rural Minnesota, since there's going to be fewer of us in rural Minnesota, to have senior members. So, 2017 tax bill, income tax reciprocity Wisconsin, big deal in Houston County, Social Security tax reduction, military pension tax reduction, veterans home, we did work on veterans homes this last year. House File 5 reinsurance bill. No money given to insurance companies. That's absolutely false. It saved the individual market and actually has more carriers coming in. We're going to have $1 billion surplus because of the 2017 tax bill. First in the nation, student loan forgiveness. We talked about some of the other things. We supported broadband, tax conformity, and increasing the estate tax. And thank you very much. I ask for your vote. Every day I give it everything that I can give it. I feel kind of like Scotty and Captain Kirk, where Captain Kirk says, "Scotty, you got to give me more." And Scotty says, "I'm giving you all I can, but I'll still try to give you more." Thank you. I need your vote.
That's me. My name is Jonathan Eisner. I live in Wanamingo with my 2 1/3 children. Good, thank you. I live in Wanamingo with my 2 1/3 children, and it's very, very important to me that I get to stay there. Since I graduated high school in 2000 and have had the benefit of returning to southern Minnesota, we do not have the opportunities that we had a generation ago, and I see nothing changing significantly that we're going to have the opportunities that we have now a generation from now. I do not want to move again. I want my grandchildren to grow up in Wanamingo, and that's why you should vote for me, because I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we have a thriving economy with as many people involved as possible to have a future. This isn't the first time we've run into these problems as Minnesotans. Historically, when we've hit this wall in the past, with the beginning of industrialization and other points in time, we figured out how to keep our agricultural economies very strong, and then we surpassed it with things like soybeans and ethanol, and just building our future where it hadn't been before. And so that's what I want to see, because things are going to be tough for the next few years, and they are going to get harder. Brazil is cultivating new fields, and so however people change or adjust, these are still big issues that we're going to have to deal with. And so this means this is a time where we have to bond together. We have to work as a single state and push forward. So I am the candidate who wants to see that happen. We have a lot of bottlenecks, and I want to work through them. So thank you very much for your time.
I'm for. Okay. Hi, I'm Nels Pearson again. I want to thank everyone who came out here tonight. There's a lot of things that you can do with your time, and you chose to be here. And we kind of are required to be here. Most of you chose to be here, and we really appreciate that. Anyone who gets a chance to see this, thanks for watching this video and taking the time to learn about how agriculture impacts the legislature and impacts the state of Minnesota. Again, I'm Nels Pearson. I grew up on a dairy farm in a town called Butterfield, Minnesota, which if you don't know where that is, don't feel bad, because there's people who live there that don't know either. And I share that, again, even when I'm talking to my neighbors in the city of Rochester, because it's one of those things that we know that the voice of the folks in the rural part of the state, it's getting softer and softer because the representation numbers is decreasing. So I do know the issues that the folks in the rural area are dealing with. That's why I wrote the beginning farmer tax credit bill and worked with Democrats. Like you say, Mayor Clark, you're absolutely right. The Agriculture Committee, I've been honored to serve on that committee with Chair Rod Hamilton. It's been consistent, and actually when Representative Poppy used to chair that committee as well. It's always been known as the committee that everyone aspires to be as nonpartisan, get all of the bills heard, let the best ideas come forward and emerge. And the beginning farmer tax credit just happened to be one of them that was very well received. What I don't like hearing is this preposterous argument that the legislature introduced a 1,000-page bill, 990 pages. The accuracy is it's 983. The reality is no one ever talks about anything negative in the entire bill. You've had months now to read it. And I've never heard
an argument stating that there was something bad in the bill. The governor had an entire staff to review it, and he chose to veto probably one of the most important pieces of legislature in the state of Minnesota for this last legislative cycle. And after very little warning or participation, and after we had already sent him a brilliantly written tax bill as a standalone bill. So I don't like that argument. Every time it gets brought up, I will ask the question again and again, what didn't you like in the bill?
Yeah, thank you to the Ag Alliance for hosting the forum. 2 years ago, I was also here and participated. A little older, a little wiser. In 1991, when Representative Davids was elected, he was 32, just a little bit older than I was. So this whole seniority argument, it's nice, it's a good talking point. But you know what? There comes a point when the career politicians need to let go of the rein and give it to the next generation of leaders to contribute to the community. And that's what I'm trying to do as a school board member and now as a state representative. And we have some tremendous opportunity. We live in the most beautiful part of, I think, of Minnesota and even the country. And we have some amazing resources and some even more amazing people. And so we've got to tap our potential and make the most out of what we have. And so I'm willing to do that with whoever is willing to do that with me. A few facts. I mean, facts do matter. I know we live in an age where people get their news from different sources and believe their own sets of facts. But if we didn't give the insurance companies $542 million, who did we give it to? So that only 3% of Minnesotans, those 3% on the individual market, saw reductions, and the highest reduction was that 27%. A few percent here and there, maybe for a few thousand people in those in the individual market. 3% of Minnesotans. The rest were the small group market, who also have to go on MNsure, the exchange, to get their insurance. Small group markets, they saw their insurance go up after we gave someone $542 million of taxpayer dollars. So that matters a lot. Tax reciprocity hasn't happened yet. We've done some tax credits here and there, and I want to thank Representative Davids for working on tax credits, but we still don't have full reciprocity. So that's an issue. So we got to be honest with people, and that's I think what we need more in politics. So thank you so much for hosting, and thank you to my fellow candidates for stepping up to the plate.
Okay, with that, thanks for the candidates that came this evening. Thanks for our panelist of questioners. On behalf of the Southeast Ag Alliance, this is Dave Scavell saying good evening.
Whoever is listening.